You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Are you ready?
The world listens. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
I gotta sign up. I'm ready. I can be two things at once.
How many things at once can you be?
1,046,000.
That's a lot.
It's a very accurate number.
That's a lot of things.
1,046,000.
This is a truthful.
That's what happens when you have trauma.
I can wear as many hats as I need to.
At the same time.
How many?
The true magician.
Like if we could really quantify it, and it's probably something that science pretends to be able to quantify, but I bet you we can't really. But if you could imagine how many things are actually taking place inside your body right now. Like, do you know what I mean? Like how many chemical reactions, how many thought synapses, how many, how many actions are taking place right now inside of your body? Gazillions,
the autonomic system taking care of this, that, which is communicating with all of these different things right now. And
right. The muscles in your tongue and like there's so many.
1,042,000,000.
So we're going to talk about this topic today on the podcast that it came to us not too long ago because we have evolved in our relationship to a point where we can see things so much clearer as far as how things used to be, right? Mm-hmm. And that's normal. That's how the healing process works, right? It's done kind of retrospectively. You look back and you realize how far you've come. And if you're not doing that work, we highly encourage it, right? You can't see how far you've come unless you pause and actually turn around and look. So it's really good to reflect on that specifically, right? How different you are today than you were last week, last year, 5 years, so on and so forth. So that's not what we're going to talk about today, but that is a very important thing to do. But because we do that retrospectively on the regular, we have started to really understand and realize, wow, not only did we have we come through a lot, right? Not only is it like, holy shit, we have no idea how that happened, right? No clue how we healed and got through some of the things that we got through, but we did it. And one of the things that came...
I think we have some idea.
We do have some. That's the point of this episode is it's like we recognize there is something in that space. One of the things that stood out to us that really made a big difference. And what it is our ability to like evolve and change and our willingness to change. And so it's important to... That's what we're going to get in today, but I want to make sure that it's really kind of clear because there's a difference between being like, yes, I'm willing to change. I'm willing to look at my stuff. I'm willing to be accountable. All of that stuff is like exactly what we're talking about, but there's another layer to it where what that actually means is you actually have to be willing to do it. Like it's putting action behind that thing. And in a relationship, and this is going to be kind of focused from that perspective, right? In relationships, even though obviously this is something you're doing for yourself and you can do it for yourself. You don't have to be in a relationship to kind of embody this thing, but you have to be willing to be able to take criticism and feedback or input or thoughts or advice. You have to be able to take that information in and then actually change, right? Yeah. You have to be willing to be able to be molded and adapted and evolved, and like you have to be able to take that inner criticism and instead of getting defensive and shutting down and pushing away and judging and criticizing and flipping everything back on the other person, you have to say, oh my gosh, I had never looked at it that way, and then get really curious. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What comes up like, sorry, babe, I felt like I did a really great job of explaining that, but then... You did
a really great job. I think some of the things that come up when people hear that and that they might immediately be like, no, is that saying like, I'm not going to change for anybody. Mm-hmm. And like,
or you can't change anybody either.
Well, yeah, but like just for instance, that like, I'm not going to change for anybody. Don't tell me to change. I'm who I am. And nobody's telling you have to change for anybody. In fact, like don't change for other people. But are you willing to grow for yourself? Are you willing, like change isn't always bad. Change doesn't mean pretending to be somebody who you're not. Being willing to change and grow. And as you said, be moldable or adaptive, not like adaptable or I can't get the right, the suffix is correct. But like, are you willing to grow and not be set in, I'm right, you're wrong. This is the way things should be. Don't tell me any different. Are you willing to be like, I haven't seen it for that perspective. that actually resonates with me. And now I'm willing to grow and look at things from a new perspective that resonates on a deeper level, instead of saying, nope, this is the way it is. This is how, it's that whole personal journey of it's okay to do things one way and then get more information, to have other people's point of views, because we're all in this together, and like see what resonates more. And then see when your actions actually need a shift and need to grow. And it's you don't have to do it, right? But it's crucial, we believe, in the evolution of yourself and growth of yourself and the health of your relationship, to allow that and not only grow yourself, but also be willing to see that your partner is also changing, instead of they'll never change.
Right.
Yeah.
So this kind of came up for us because we were recognizing, like, nowadays when one of us brings something to the other person. So sometimes we'll be processing together and reflecting on an experience or talking through something that we're going through. And we will have a thought or an insight, or, I mean, truthfully too, there's a lot of things that, because you and I have been together for so long and because we know each other really, really well, we kind of see where the other person gets stuck a lot.
Yeah.
And we might have our interpretation of why they're getting stuck or what is keeping them stuck is definitely more about us sometimes, right? It's our perception of the experience.
You do this as me.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we can see each other uniquely different than the other person can see themselves. And our willingness to be able to say, hey, have you thought about it this way?
Yeah.
Instead of hearing that information and running it through some sort of filter where I give you a response of like, yeah, I thought about it that way, and then explain to you why that way's wrong. Or better yet, just pretend like, oh, that's an interesting thought, and then move on because I'm like, whatever, that has nothing to do with me. In fact, actually being like, I hadn't thought about it that way. And now I'm going to get really curious about it. And so we're helping each other grow and evolve. And that help is so necessary and so important, but you have to be open to receiving it. And the first part of it is, it's like, yeah, I want to be accountable. I want to be open to that. And then the actual act, that's the part that I'm kind of trying to hone in on and talk about, is it's like, it's kind of putting your money where your mouth is, right? Where you have to suddenly be okay with accepting that feedback. And sometimes that feedback is hard.
It is a lot of times.
Right. It's not like...
There's a lot of times it's just like, holy shit, I did not see that. That's how I've been behaving, or that's how I've been making you feel. Like you just, it's in the shadow and you don't have that peace. And so when that light gets shined on it, sometimes it's really hard. But it's like...
So some of the ways that we used to do this, and you're probably going to relate to a lot of these, where we were just always at odds with each other. And
you.
Right. Everything, it was way less about my actions, behaviors, choices, what I was doing, and way more about what you were doing.
Right.
And then anytime you tried to highlight and bring awareness to something that I was doing, I would deflect and just redirect everything back to you.
Right. And then it's also like not only just that projection onto the other person, but as receiving, the other person wasn't speaking to the behaviors, things, the choices, the actions. It felt like they were speaking to you as a person. Like if you did something hurtful or harmful, it wasn't like this action. It was, you are a hurtful, harmful person.
Right.
And so that way that it would kind of bounce back and forth in these really us digging our heels in kind of way.
Because there's a part of this that is like, essentially what we're talking about is you have to be willing to be able to change and be molded by the other person. But you have to first and foremost be willing to receive help. Like that's the really big part of this, is it's like, it's one thing to ask for help. It's one thing to say, I need help. It's one to say, it's, that's all part of the process. Yeah. And then there's like this other really big hurdle of, oh, I'm actually going to allow that help in, even if it comes in the form that I don't feel good with. Like if help feels uncomfortable and not from an unhealthy place of like toxicity and like, I'm trying to help you, why don't you let me help you? That's not what I'm talking about. There's definitely help that doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Not all help is supposed to be received. Not all help is help.
Exactly. Right. But we're talking about it from the perspective of like a healthy relationship.
Yes.
And It's
not gaslighting and toxicity and like.
But I know for me, even when I got through all of that of like, yes, I need help. Yes, please help me. Yes, I want your help. Yes, I'm willing to change. Yes, I'm willing to look at things differently. Yes, 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 yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I eventually had to actually get over that hurdle of like letting all of that stuff in.
Yeah.
Like it was one thing to ask for it. It was one thing to be open to it. But then it was a completely other thing of letting it actually in
Mm-hmm.
so that it could help. Like that's the whole thing is like, you've been trying to help me for so long and I just wasn't letting any of it in.
Yeah.
And then once I was able to let it in, turns out things really started to improve, right? Where because I was willing to actually be accountable now. And when you would bring something, and now when you bring something, I'm like, oh, I need to fix that immediately. Thank you. Right. That's something that I need to start working on.
Or you hear it and be like, whether it resonates or not, it might not resonate to you.
Yeah.
You don't have to, we're not saying that as soon as your partner brings you something, you're like, that's up to me to fix right now. That's not that's just how we bring things healthy to each other now, as opposed to, I need you to change so you fit this for me. So you're this for me. Like, of course, you're not going to want to respond to that. But we don't ask that of the other partner now. And we used to. Like, I know for me, instance, I wanted you to behave a certain way because that's the partner that I wanted. I wanted you to not do certain things. And instead of holding myself accountable and what I was allowing in my space, I was putting all of that responsibility on you. You need to do this for me. And that doesn't really create an atmosphere where you're like, okay, I'm going to reflect on some of this and do this for you. But when it started shifting of like, this is the space that I have for me and I love you, but this is like holding myself accountable and my boundaries. And then that came, and I feel like that's the same for you well, at least I related to that. It felt like for me on things is that you wanted me to be this way for you. And I tried. And then you got a whole lot of resistance and all these unhealthy, coming up, which then when we came into the healing, and you might recognize this too, you now will no longer entertain the possibility of reflecting from somebody else's words, because you're like, you're trying to manipulate me. You're trying to control me. So that going back to allowing that help and being able to discern the difference when you have healed, been working through and healing trauma around being controlled in other ways, it makes you really, really, really stubborn and like almost refusing to look at yourself when it comes from a partner, when it comes from an outside source that is mirroring for you, because you're like, nope, not willing to receive that. And if help doesn't look like how you've decided help is going to look, it's hard to receive.
That's what got me that's what I've been thinking in the last little bit is like, there are certain, like I can think back over the course of my life and there were things, there were people, there was help that I was willing to receive and open to and would take in and allow it to kind of shift and mold what, I was doing or what I was thinking or how I was perceiving life or moving through life. And I mean, it was like everything from like, stuff on a podcast that I would hear and I'd be like, oh, I got to try to practice that. I got to implement that. Like that's me receiving help, but that's help that I want to receive, right? That's help that's making me feel better about myself. And like, that's help that I resonate with because it aligns with my story of what help should look like and also what help should make me feel like, right? And there's another part of that where some help is uncomfortable. And because it is challenging you, because it's help in seeing the thing that you don't want to see about yourself. Right. It's help in highlighting an aspect of you. And your partner is always going to do that, whether you like that. We believe that's always happening, regardless of whether or not it's healthy. I mean, it's happening healthy and unhealthy all the time in relationships. But now you get the opt-in to use the healthy aspect of it in a healthy way and actually be able to reflect and to make changes. And it is uncomfortable.
That's a big distinguishing.
That's a distinguishing.
It's a distinguisher. A fire extinguisher is that uncomfortableness of it. Because growth comes from pushing out of your comfort zone. And so the fact that it is uncomfortable is a big thing. A lot of times when you are looking to, oh my gosh, I can't think of the phrase. When you're in unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy toxic patterns or in stagnant energies where you don't want to change, the help that you seek out to and look for is only ways to validate and like say, no, what you're doing is right. It's like you're getting the feedback that aligns
that feedback
with your
loop.
patterns and behaviors that you are in, that you want to stay in, that you don't want to grow out of. And it's like, see, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do anything. There's no growth here. I'm perfect. It's the world around me. And being willing to be uncomfortable. And that doesn't mean like so much comes in. You're not hurting yourself. You're not traumatizing yourself. You're not betraying yourself. That is not being uncomfortable. That is self-abuse, self-sabotage. But being willing to be uncomfortable and look at uncomfortable truths and other point of views and really like stretch yourself, that's where growth comes. And sometimes it's really hard to let go of what you once thought and you once believed. And sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes it feels like a liberation. And sometimes you have to really grieve it. But that uncomfortable is something to move towards. If you feel like, ooh, that's a good indication that you're moving in some place. And you're smart enough. You have that in you. Even if you forgot how to listen, to know the difference. You know when you're self-sabotaging. You might not admit it to yourself and you might keep going in that direction. That's not what this is. Some of those growth things, and when you find yourself coming up with all the excuses of why you're not good enough to do these things, or why it's too late, or all the, I don't know, I'm sure you can help me out with some of these things that pop up.
The list of excuses, right?
Right? When you find excuses. Yes.
So many.
Yeah.
The grieving part that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because I think about it from this like perspective is the part of me that doesn't want to change, or the part of me that doesn't want to take that input, or like even if it's in the specific arena, right? I mean, we can use smoking for an example, right? We used to smoke, and obviously we knew we weren't supposed to be smoking for our health and all those kind of different things. And people would ask all the time, or people would, like,
especially our poor kids.
But there were people that were trying to help, obviously, with saying like, have you tried this, or have you tried this, or have you tried this? And I didn't want help in quitting smoking because I didn't want to quit
smoking. I wanted to be healthy, right? But I was not ready to quit smoking.
And the truth of it is, there was a part of me that didn't want to quit smoking.
Yeah.
That was all. There was just a part of me that didn't want to quit smoking. There was another part of me that absolutely wanted to quit.
Yes.
There was another part of me that was like
begging.
Yes, just like pleading, please fucking quit this already.
It's terrible.
Right. But that part of me that didn't want to quit, that's the part that wouldn't listen to advice. That's the part that would run everything through the filter of why this is actually a benefit.
Right.
Why this is a good thing. Why I need to keep smoking. And then once we finally quit, and we were able, and if you're a smoker, you're like, yeah, sure, you quit, right? This was like a legit, we quit, and it's been, I know, 5 years or something like that, right? But because we both had that cycle too.
I'm like counting on my fingers.
We quit and then started again, quit and then started again. And so this one really feels, I mean, if we didn't start smoking again in 2020,
right? We made it through 2020.
Likelihood that we made it over the big hump.
Right. This is the longest that I've gone without smoking.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since I started.
I started. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that part of me that wanted to smoke eventually kind of fell away, and it wasn't quote unquote in charge anymore. I had all these other parts that were kind of stepping forth, but I have to grieve that part.
Right.
Like that was a part of me that, showed up and protected me for a really long time during time periods in my life when I really needed it. And allowing that part to change and evolve, because the truth of it is I'm changing and evolving, right? I'm stepping into the version of me that wanted to be finished smoking, right? And in order to evolve and become that version of me that wanted to quit smoking, this other part of me had to go away. This other part of me kind of had to step aside and fade off into the distance. And there's a grief with that. There's a thing there that has to be kind of acknowledged and felt. And that's kind of I don't know if that's an easy example to kind of articulate what I'm trying to talk about, but you said, grieving like the change in the process of it. And it's like, grieving that part of you, right? Like if you reflect on something that I'm doing or a behavior that I'm doing and I'm resistant to changing that, then there's a part of me that's resistant, right? What is that part trying to tell me? What is that part trying to do? Why is that part holding on to this coping mechanism or this behavior?
Where has
it
found safety here?
Right.
A known.
And am I able to move out of that place into the unknown and into the uncomfortable with the understanding that that's probably where I need to go. Like that's probably where my growth is. And then just honoring that part that was there and grieving that part when it's gone, the part that was protecting and the part that was kind of resistant to the help.
Right. And it gets so tricky because like when you're looking at that growth thing and there are the manipulation of like where you have to like people demanding you to change for them and the different ways, like it's really getting that fine tune of recognizing it's not if it's helping anybody else, it's if it's helping me. And that comes with healing across the board. You're not healing for your kids. You're not healing for your partner. Do they benefit? Absolutely. And a lot of times that is like what starts you, but that cannot be what you're basing it all off of. So I won't go into, because I know we've done other episodes on that, but really like getting into like, is this helpful for me? Is this healing for me? And that is such a thing that is such a block for people because not a lot of people believe that they deserve that. Their partner does, their kids do, their parents do, their siblings, whoever else, like doing it for that person deserves that. But them themselves, like, do I deserve this healthier version of me? Do I deserve it? And it's so hard, especially when you say, yes, I deserve this healthier version for me. And it means that there's going to be loss of this. And then you're like, why would I want to go for that healthier? I'll just stick where there's not the loss. And it's so like there's that uncomfortable and that's the grief. Sometimes it means things fall away. And sometimes it means that you gain more than you could ever have even dreamed. Usually you end up gaining a lot of wonderful, but it doesn't come like there's a flow. There's an ebb and flow. Things come in, they fall away in different, no matter how hold you tight. Even if you decide you're never going to change, nothing's going to change. You're going to keep things the way they are right now. Nothing's going to change. I'm going to hold on to everything and keep things as they are. It's going to change. Something's going to change. People still come and go.
I know, right? How funny is it that we convince ourselves that no, it's not.
If I just hold really still
it's
and
not.
hold on
I'm
really
strong
tight,
enough.
right?
Right. I can hold this forever.
And you give it your all. You try. Like
Right.
you take
and
your.
then in the meantime, the universe is just like change everything around you.
Right. And then it
even
makes you more afraid of change.
Right.
And it makes you even more resistance. And you just try to hold on tighter and no change. Because it's terrifying. And so the more that you do lose, the more that you get, that's all you can see. You don't see the gain. You don't see the possibilities because you've just like spiraled yourself down. I've done that. It's not a sitting over here judgment being like, this is what you're doing wrong, people. I'm like, I walked that walk. I still find myself in that walk.
Right.
It's really hard to come out of it sometimes. And then when you do come out of it and you make massive change, I'm in a grieving process right now.
Do you have a part that is kind of evolved and changed and you're grieving it?
Very much so.
Do you want to speak to it at all, or you don't have to?
Right. I'm like, I don't want to turn, not yet. Maybe that'll come up later.
Okay.
But I definitely
Is there
don't
one
want to.
maybe that we could talk about? I'm trying to think for myself too, that
Okay.
because I think that might be a beneficial thing.
Well, it's still big, but it's one that we've talked about before. It's just, for instance, like our big move.
Right.
That was massive change. We had to be willing to do things differently. And there's a massive amount of grief that is like in our bodies.
Yeah.
And we can choose to sit in the grief, which sometimes I do, or just like allow and keep changing and keep growing and keep like our whole, like once we let go and start to embrace the unknown, so much happens.
I've got one that I can speak to.
You do? Do it. I'm ready to listen.
It's an uncomfortable one. And it kind of directly correlates to the beginning of the episode where we're like, we're going to talk about this thing where you've got to be open to allowing your partner to like mold and change you in a sense, right? You have to be open to receiving their help and their input. And when I say criticism their feedback. Feedback's a better word, right? You got to be open to receiving their feedback. And like over the course of our relationship, you and me, we got to a certain level of our healing where you were starting to feel, I don't know if it was you were feeling safe enough. It definitely had to do with safety, right? Because you wouldn't do this if you didn't feel safe. But you were starting to feel strong enough, as well as like holding a boundary within yourself, because you had done enough work that you you really started to be able to articulate yourself in a much more stronger way. And you started to really call me out when I was gaslighting you. And you would also use verbiage that, we eventually got to the point where you're like, you're gaslighting me. Like, this is what's happening. You're doing this thing, right? Do you have a completely different experience of this? Like, you're looking at me like,
I'm just like, I'm feeling nervous and you're not doing anything wrong. Please keep talking.
Okay. Like,
it's normal that we're saying these really hard things and both of us are like, scared.
But I saw your face and I'm like,
sorry. I can't control my nervous face. It's twitchy.
What I thought you were thinking was like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? I never said anything. It's like, what happened? What is he talking about? Anyways, it got like, there was a certain point where you kept telling me that stuff over and over and over again, where it was like I was manipulating and flipping and turning everything around. And I was so resistant to that for so long. I had my heels dug in. I was not going to admit that I was doing that. And then I admitted to myself that I was doing that. And then I was willing to actually hear you and listen and be like, what if I am actually doing that? And when I was able to start reflecting on that and starting to look at that, I was able to start to change that. And obviously that had really big, impactful things for our relationship. And part of the reason why I was so resistant to looking at that, like, it's really funny because I can see the progression of it where, like, in the beginning when it started to become a thing, and maybe gaslighting was too, whether it's a strong word or not, right? It evokes a lot, especially in today's world and culture and everything like that. But I don't know if you necessarily use that exact verbiage. You may have at one point or another, but a lot of it was just articulating that I was turning things around, right? That it was always me trying to manipulate the situation. And I was so resistant to admitting that because it was going to mean that I was something that I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
Right. It was me, like, having to admit to that meant that I was displaying behaviors and actions that I was incredibly judgmental of. Like, not only, basically I didn't want to admit to that because I didn't want to be like my dad. And then later on I understood that it was also, I didn't want to be like my mom. And I was so resistant to somehow embodying that really toxic behavior in the current version of me, right, as an adult at that point in our relationship and everything. And I didn't want to admit that. And it wasn't from this place of like, truthfully, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. I thought I was doing this other thing. Yeah. That was like the beginning phases of it where you first started kind of articulating that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I was like, you're so off base. You're so out. Like, that is not at all what I'm doing. Let me explain to you what I'm doing. And then slowly over time, I had to eventually own it and be like, oh my God, that's so what I'm doing. And there's beauty in like recognizing where it came from as well, right? I know why I'm doing that today in a sense, right? I can see the correlation and connection to childhood. And I can see all the reasons why. And that's important information to have. Like, as you're healing, you got to be able to put some of those pieces together and really understand why the behavior is there and where it's coming from. And and the grieving process. All of these things are really, really important. And then at some point you just got to be accountable, right?
Yeah.
You just got to be like, I'm really sorry. I can't change yesterday. And, you know, I don't know what tomorrow's going to be, but I'm going to do my best today and in every moment to not do that anymore and just be really accountable for it. And had I not been open to receiving that, like initially, you were so good at being like, you just, like, I don't know if you've had awareness of how big of an act of self-love that is, to continually like show up for yourself in that way, especially when you're confronted with super shitty narcissistic behavior from me. And being able to just acknowledge it and then start to own it and start to change it and be willing to, like, had I not done that right, who knows, right? We don't ever know. Who knows, right? We could have continued to have a really toxic, unhealthy relationship for the rest of our lives, or it would have lasted another 2 years, or who knows, right? Or I would have changed, or whatever, something would have happened. But you and I both have done that countless times where it's like, okay, that's kind of what I'm talking about this whole episode. It's like you have to get to the point where you're willing to take that feedback in and really reflect and own it. Mm-hmm. And then you step into that accountability phase, right? Okay, baby. You do talking.
I do talking.
I'm going to do listening.
It's, you went big. You went big. I appreciate that. That was like really brave, and that was courageous. That was a really good job. You did a really good job. That was really big. Let's see. I'm kind of also feeling that because I don't know that I've ever heard you articulate that to me. And so to hear like, this is also a moment of like behavior changes have like definitely been there.
Right.
Right. But I don't think I've heard you really, and maybe you have, and maybe this is just like, just because I'm hearing something now doesn't mean you haven't expressed it. Just sometimes when our walls are up, our filters are up, right. I miss it. I miss things.
You're hearing it with today ears.
But I'm hearing it with today ears. And that was just like a really like big healing moment. And just like connecting so many different things of like, it's just connecting all these things. And just like my heart is hearing that, like, oh, like that's such a loving thing that you just said, you know, and there's part of me that still wants to, you know, come up and be like, don't talk bad about yourself. And this, you know, that part that unhealthy version too.
Right, wants to caretake me.
And like sit there and like
let that codependent
do all that,
in.
right? Let me codependent all over you right now. But just like, honestly, it's because I also am still learning how to really receive. And like, that was a really, really beautiful thing that you just expressed to me and was able to, I can hear it and I can see it. And that level of self-love that you have for yourself to be like, I'm willing to change this because, and it's not just for me, right? It's whether I'm in your life or not. That's like changing how you show up in the world for people. And that's such a big deal. Am I benefiting because I'm here? Yes. But like how you are showing up is how the world gets you, and how, you know, I'm not saying like you're supposed to give to the world, but my point is like when you work on yourself, it's for yourself and you're willing to change for yourself. Other people benefit, yes, but like you carry that with you no matter who's in your space, no matter where you're at. Like that is for you and you're always with you. So that is always going to be with you. And it's just who is around you that gets to benefit. There was a lot of, I don't know if we want to keep spinning on this, but as I don't know if it's healthy or not for me to express more to what you said. Of course. Or if it's me taking over the conversation, and I'm not really sure. I'm like, we're on a podcast right now. So is this where we're talking about this? Whereas if we were sitting at the, you know, kitchen counter, I don't think I would share any of this. So I'm like really kind of on this, like, I don't know what the healthy choice is right now. And sometimes that's where you're at. Sometimes you don't know what the healthy choice is.
Right. I think you're okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll say this first. And And it's like really what it comes down to is, yes, like it's not so much letting other people change you. It's letting the situation change you. And the other people that are in your space that are presenting that are the mirrors. They're the soundboard. Like me expressing to you and you expressing to me is allowing me to see and hear what I need to see and hear within myself, and being willing to change that. So that situation is what came up and allows the change. And it doesn't have to. Like, you all have a choice. You don't have to change. You don't have to see that, hear that, respond to that. Like, it's all up to you.
That's what I was saying too, is like, I couldn't even,
yeah.
Like, it's not a matter of, you don't have to do that. I didn't see anything to do.
Right.
It was so like, you're out in left field stuff. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's 100% not what I'm doing.
Right.
So it's not even like I not only do it, I didn't have to will. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you have to be willing to change. But if you don't think there's anything to change, like if you don't think there's anything wrong, then why would you be willing to change something that's not wrong?
Yeah. And you
I
don't
didn't
even know.
see it as wrong.
Right.
I didn't even see the behavior.
How could you possibly look at changing something that you could not even see?
Right. Yeah. Like, it's not a matter of a disagreement where it's like, well, I see things differently.
Right.
I hear your point of view, but I'm like, no, I don't even see something. I'm not doing anything wrong. So why would I change it? And that's very true, right? People have that mindset where it's like, if it isn't broken, why fix it? If there isn't anything wrong, why would I change it? Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, where even if you can't see something, the fact that somebody else is reflecting it back to you probably means that there's something there to look at.
Right.
So that's the whole fucking idea around shadow work, is you can't see the thing that they're reflecting back.
Yes.
So if it keeps coming up and you keep it being like you kept bringing it up over and over and over again. And I don't mean this in a literal sense.
I'm really curious. Like, we're going to dive into this. Like, so please keep going.
But it's like, how could I even begin to entertain what you were saying when I couldn't even see it?
Right.
So it was less about addressing what you were highlighting and speaking to, and more about being like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? You're crazy. You're talking about something that's not even happening. So it's way less. And that, like, I feel like right now we're on like really slippery ice here.
Right.
Because we're not trying to excuse shitty behavior, right? We're not trying to say that if somebody's being a narcissist or has that narcissistic trait coming out, we're not being like, well, they couldn't see it, so that's okay.
Right.
Right.
Not saying that.
It's just the insight and the perspective of what it was really like for me, where it's like, why would I change something that I can't even see?
Yeah.
Right. And that alone should have been the key in my brain to go like, But because I don't see things that way, it makes sense why it wasn't, right? But now that we see things from like, hey, you're a beautiful mirror for me. And you're going to be able to see everything that's behind me at certain time periods that I can't, right? So all I have to do is trust that if you keep seeing something, then I should start looking at it too.
Right.
Right? I should start getting really curious about it.
You said something that was really, like, you say so many beautiful things, right? But you have this like, just like such awareness with that. And that really like sparks a safe way, I think, for people to be curious. And it also sparks, like, not only is it like a way to communicate with people and like seeing that, but it also, like you saying this, sparks in our relationship safety to speak up, safety for curiosity about behaviors in the relationship. And it's like what you say, you know, people get in that, if it's not broke, why fix it? And if somebody's coming to you with something, just because you don't think something's broke, but if somebody's coming to you and saying, we have an issue here, it's broke. Like, something is not working. You're like, I don't want to have to deal with this, so I'm not going to change it. Like, it's just going to keep breaking. You know, you have to be willing to, you don't have to be, but like, hopefully there's a choosing to be willing to look at something. And you can still have that. You can look at something and say, that actually doesn't align. I'm not seeing it from your point of view. My point of view is this. And then you
probably will for a while.
Right? But there's also a healthy part of that too. Sometimes people bring stuff to you And they're like, you're doing this. And it's simply a projection.
Yes.
So there is this dynamic.
I want to speak to that. Okay. Because that's another step in the process of people will bring something to you that is their projection. Right. So then you have to be able to discern, is this more about me or more about them?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's more than being like, nope, that's about you. Not looking at me.
Right. I want to this is another thing that you and I have learned. Like we can now retrospectively look back over the past however many years, right? And reflect, and like we can report where people will project, because truth be told, all of it's a projection. And the fact is, like, and this is like, you can just trust us on this, and you probably have some experience of it over yourself as well, right? But it's always going to be a little bit of both. It's always going to be, it's a projection of them and their shit that they're trying to place on you. And it's a reflection of your shit that you don't want to look at.
Because you're mirroring each other. You both have it.
So you can shorten the curve really quickly if you just skip that step where you want to argue that point. Like if you're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but just hear me out. I feel like it's not right and it's more about you. And let me tell you why. Just skip that step and be like, oh, you know what? This definitely has a little bit of both of us. It's going to be some of you. It's going to be some of me. And it might feel like this is the other thing too. And you and I, guilty isn't the right word, because this isn't something to be guilty about. This is just like the learning curve, right? The process, where I feel like sometimes we get to those points and we recognize, oh, this is, okay, I'm definitely doing some projecting. This definitely has something to do about me. But it also feels like this one's probably a little bit bigger for you. So we quantify it and it's like, okay, this one's a bigger one for you. Truth be told, I think it's always 50-50. I think I just can't see the bigger side of it for myself. Does that make sense? Like sometimes we'll have something where it's like, oh yeah, you're right. But this one feels a little bit more like it's yours, right? So I'll take some ownership of the projection. You do it too, right? We'll do it back and forth where it's like, oh, yep, I see what you're saying. But because this one has to do with your dad, it's definitely more about you. You're like, okay, I get it. Yep, you're right. I brought it up. So it's definitely more about me. Right. And the truth is, I think it's always equal. I think it's always 50-50 where it's yours and mine. Right.
It just depends. Yeah. It's both.
It's just a part of the shadow that we still can't see.
Who is embodying that unhealthy version at that moment? Yeah. Because it's both. It's not immediately turn on. We're like, well, it's 50-50, babe. Looks like you got to do half the work. So I'm going to be over here.
Right. This one's 70-30. So I got my 30 done.
Right. It's definitely not about, like, I love that you're saying that, because it's not a scoreboard. Right? It's just realizing like we're coming from the same place. We're coming from love or we're coming from wound. And there's so much, and a lot of times so it's both. Yeah. You know, there's just so much. It's being curious. And that's what all of it is about. It's about being curious, which allows the adaptability, not being like, it is this. I'm not changing. I'm not moving. I'm right. You're wrong. I'm healthy. You're hurtful. It's not that. Are there really unhealthy situations where it's that? Yes, but that's not where you're arguing the point. Like those kind of dynamics are unhealthy and unsafe to be in. Do everything you can to get out of those. The situations that are not that, like abusive, that are not those things, it's both. Yeah. It's this introspective and learning. And I'm like having such... Like there's so much happening in my body right now. It's like I'm looking back and I'm retrospectively, I'm like memory piecing here and seeing how like everything started changing. Not changing, but not everything, but like in regarding to like what you brought up, the gaslighting experience that was happening in our relationship.
For years.
There's also like you have your version of it going down, and I did not know that you had that amount of like, because I was saying behavior changes, right? But it's really neat to hear your reflection of it and your experience, because I wasn't privy to that. But there's definitely been a healthier dynamic. But like how it came about is I had somebody mirror that to me and express that to me, that this is what was happening here. And that person almost didn't ever get to talk to me ever again. Because I was like, there's like relationships out there, right? Where there's couples that spend a lot of time criticizing their partner to other people.
Yes.
Right? The person who's closest to you is a lot of times the person that you complain the most about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that I align with. And has there been like, so hearing somebody say something like, I don't tolerate people speaking negatively about my partner.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not, if you have something negative to say about my partner,
keep it to yourself.
Well, like, you're not gonna, like, I'm not gonna ever, like, I'm like, you know, that's just not gonna be received. Is there like anyways, so we don't need to spin off on that.
I'm curious, and obviously like push pause because I want to know, right? And so tell me when we're off the air, maybe who that person
This isn't
was.
what this is about.
Okay. I got to write a note down.
This conversation is like, so that came up and I started getting curious because in my brain, gaslighting was, I've experienced it in other ways, right? Being beat and then like having it spun out like that never happened, just them acting like it didn't happen, or telling you that you attacked them, like all these kind of really unhealthy. So I'm like, he doesn't fucking do that. Like, no, what is wrong with you?
Right. You couldn't even see it.
I couldn't even see it. So what happened is being willing to hear that, and I got curious and I started like, because obviously we were having issues.
Yeah.
So there was something there. And so I started being willing to hear, not a Craig train, right? Not a what Craig's doing wrong, but like, what is some unhealthy dynamics? What are our patterns? And then when I started looking into it, the thing that I focused on after I had awareness that this is actually what's happening in our relationship, I didn't focus on what you were doing wrong. I focused on my role in it. I focused on how I'm adding gas that could be lit. Wow. I started focusing on that. And so I started changing my behaviors and not participating, not giving gas and being like, I don't remember it that way, or this is, and like trying to stay calm in those moments and not participating and engaging and like flowing, because there's a role that two people play.
Right.
It's not just a gaslighter and a poor little victim. Can there be really abusive situations like that? Oh my gosh, yes. And if you are being abused, this isn't where if you're getting beat, hurt, physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, any of these things, this is or not where you look at and say, what am I doing wrong here? Like, get out of that situation. This was not that. You and I had unhealthy patterns, but we had a safe relationship. We had unhealthy patterns and wounds that we both brought in the mirror, but we had a safe relationship. So I had to get curious. What am I doing? What's the gas that I'm putting on here? What are my behaviors? How am I cultivating this? How am I just like losing control of my emotions and getting wrapped up in what you're saying and spinning off instead of like, here I am being in a calm space and like, this is actually what I'm talking about. Not allowing this fight to turn to this, and get spiraled out to where I'm like, I don't even know. You're mad at me and I don't even know. Yeah. Like, I don't know how we got here, but now this just happened and this felt really shitty and scary and I feel crazy.
See, you would do so good at that. You would do so good at be like, okay, here I am trying one more time. This is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about all those other things. Like, we're here talking about this thing. You're like, just sit still and take accountability for this one thing. And I'm like, what about the sprinklers? Nobody wants to talk about those.
So it was a big step.
Yeah, it was a big step.
I had to change my behaviors and then be accountable for myself. And then, yes, speak accountability. It threw me when you're like, you told me that, I have to like look at that I said, you're gaslighting me. And I'm racking my brain and I'm like, was I that bold? And so I'm just like curious because I was thinking that, but I was trying so hard to not use verbiage that's like, you're doing this wrong. You are wrong. But being like, this isn't healthy. I'm not participating in this conversation. So, and I'm like, of course I messed up. Of course you're going to mess up practicing, doing these things.
We still do
things.
this too,
yes.
Right? Like, that's the other big thing is we're talking about this from some retrospective healing aspect. And that's definitely the case. But this behavior still happens sometimes. Yeah. We'll both participate in it sometimes.
Yes.
We'll both initiate, like, This still occurs because it is a coping mechanism.
It's a coping mechanism. You have all these like hormones, chemicals that are addicted to it.
I mean, the reason I do that, and I used to do it all the time, was because I was protecting myself.
Yeah.
Right? I was deflecting everything that came my way because truthfully, there's a little version of me, a tiny little boy inside that had to do that to survive.
Yeah.
And was taught how to do that. Like I went to a really good school to learn how to do that. And so it still happens because that little boy still gets triggered sometimes and sends up all of his defensive mechanisms. Because there's still times where you're like, I really feel like you're trying. And I'm like, I promise I'm not. And it's like, damn it, I am. Sorry.
And there's still parts of me that get wrapped up in that. Mm-hmm. Like I went to a really good school to learn how to gaslight myself and be manipulated. Like I would be like, they're right. I'm going to create all these things of why this is. So I was the perfect match for this, or the perfect like gas tank. I had all the tools to come in and create an environment for the situation to take place. And you were the perfect lighter. You had all the tools you needed to come in and create the situation.
I just got so uncomfortable.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
No, uncomfortable's okay. See, I'm like, let me make it better.
No, I'm hearing what people are hearing. I'm imagining the person listening where we just got done expressing how people that are gaslit bring the fuel to the fire, right? Mm-hmm. Where they contribute to the lighting of that fire.
Yeah. It's much easier to blame it all on the other person and not have no accountability in it.
Yeah. And it's true.
It's true. And it can be used where they'll start gaslighting themselves and making themselves completely wrong. Yes. And it's my fault they're gaslighting me. Yes. That's not what we're saying.
Right. It's one of those uncomfortable truths.
Yes.
That you have to start sitting in and looking at and reflecting at because it's very uncomfortable.
It's very. And there are people that are going to hear that. And so that's why we try and give those caveats. Like if this is for like our relationship was a safe relationship, but they're going to hear it's my fault. Mm-hmm. I need to change me.
Right.
And it's not your fault you're being gaslit. It's not your fault that you.
That's the really big important part because, it's not their fault.
It's not.
And we want to stop because I think that this happens all the time where we say something like that, like it's not your fault. So then the assumption is that fault then lies on your partner. And that's true, but we have to continue it backwards. Like it's not their fault either. It's not your fault. It's not their fault. It came from somewhere. It was something that was programmed into you. It was a coping mechanism because your bringing of said fuel to the fire was a survival mechanism.
It was.
Like you said, you were taught how to do that in order to survive, right? Same thing. Mm-hmm. So it's not your fault if it's happening. The fault lies somewhere behind you. And you were just given it.
Yeah.
And now it's your opportunity to get curious about how to change it.
Right? Right? We don't need to place blame, but we do need to take action.
Accountability.
Mm-hmm. So me changing my behaviors. Now, if you were unwilling to do things different, then it's my discernment, right, to choose whether or not I stay in this relationship and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because this is one example. And this is like, I was bringing fuel to the fire and you were the fire, right? We have this. This happened switched many times. Of where I'm the igniter, right? There's so many different ways of where there's one coping mechanism and then another one. No one is worse than the other. They're just different, but they both come together and create an unhealthy pattern that can destroy relationships over and over again, destroy patterns in your life. And even if like, you're like seeing like, yes, this relationship's over, but then you go to the next one and you find it being recreated in a different way, right? There's different ways that it comes in, but it's an unhealthy thing of where something is going wrong. They're doing this. And how did I get here again? How did I get here and again? Because like you're bringing that part of you to it. That accountability is so hard. It's so hard to look at because it's so easy to make yourself wrong for everything. for absolutely everything. And that is, again, something that you look at changing, right? It's that uncomfortable thing of where you look at changing, that maybe there are two people involved. Maybe there's other things happening.
You know what's so interesting?
What's that?
What you just said, right? It's easy to make yourself the problem. It's easy to make yourself the reason why everything is wrong.
Yeah.
And the more that we unpacked this, and not only just like right now in the scope of this conversation, but obviously over the past several years of us processing all of this and healing some of this stuff and getting to the point where we can actually both bring now beautiful things to,
right.
to the relationship rather than shitstorms. But both of those actions, so like me gaslighting and you bringing some of the fuel for the fire to take place, both of those actions, like we said, are driven from this coping mechanism of survival. But truthfully, they're coming from not truthfully, on top of that, they're coming from a place of shame.
Yeah.
We were both coming from the same place.
Mm-hmm.
We were both coming from the place of feeling like everything is my fault and I'm the problem.
Yes.
Right. So it looks different for me as the person doing the lighting because I'm trying to make everything seem like it's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
But because I'm doing that, the reason I'm doing that is because it's too hard for me to sit in my shame of everything is my fault.
Yeah.
Right. Because my life is so terrible and it's all my fault.
Yeah.
Like I've ruined this relationship. I've ruined our kids. I've ruined everything is my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the truth that I'm feeling inside. And that's the uncomfortable shame that I have to sit in. So in order to not do that, deflect and, spin everything in gaslight. And then I think, and I'm, safe assumption because we've talked about this, but it's like you're coming from that same place of shame and feeling like everything's your fault and
Mm-hmm.
you've ruined your life, like all of those same things. It just looks like this different protective mechanism in order to protect from that, being unable to sit in that shame.
Right. It totally does. There's the, it's like the same thing, but with slightly different tactics
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, because everything's my fault. Of course, I'm to blame for everything. Of course, if I would have just done this better, if I would have lost weight, if I would have kept the house cleaner, all these just like weird things, if I wouldn't have said this, if I could just be smarter, if I could just be prettier, if I could just be open to the things, if I just wouldn't be reactive. Like I used to tell you, like, I wish I could just cut this part out of me. Just if I could I'd be okay if I could just remove this part that feels, that is hurting, that's telling me this isn't okay. This behavior needs to stop. And I'm like, everything would just be fine if I could just let you do whatever you wanted in our relationship. And I just said, yes, Craig, to everything, then everything would be fine.
Yeah.
So I had that and I internalized, right? So I would I would take it out on myself and others around me, but I didn't realize that I would take it out on others around me by having no patience, but completely retreating and being unavailable, being an unavailable partner, being an unavailable parent, and that fucking sucks. By being unavailable because I had nothing, I was imploding. And in my head, like even though everything was my fault, there was still another story that I had that I couldn't change my stuff because even though everything was my fault, I was still subconsciously blaming you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's all my fault if I could just be better. But then there was always, if he would just not do this, if he would just not do this. So I was still actually blaming you for everything while still blaming me and making it all, it's the double bind twist, brain fuck. No, I couldn't do anything. I was just a mess. So there was still that projection. I just didn't actually project. I internalized and just fueled inside. So I was in battle inside myself, which sounds a lot of toxicity and gas that I was bringing just ready to be lit, right? And yeah, it was just, that's why really you have to be uncomfortable with looking at your role.
You got to be willing to receive help.
Willing to receive help.
It's making me think like just in regards to this one dynamic of our relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I talked earlier about how I had to start being able to listen and hear what you were saying, right? I had to start being able to let those words land and sit with it. I didn't realize that the reason that we had gotten to that point was because you had sat with the uncomfortable thing that other person brought up, right? That thing of like, hey, here's a perspective to see your relationship through. And I think this might be what's happening. And you take a peek in that lens and you're like, fuck off, person. You're dead to me now. That's a crazy lens, right? That's not what's happening.
Right.
But there was something inside of you that opened up to that help. And you were willing to question, like, not just your reality, but question how you were seeing things.
Yeah.
And then starting to question your act. Like, you did so much work in that moment, being able to receive and do all of that, and then to start to make those shifts and changes. So grateful you did that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
And we'll do a lot of work here.
So it comes back to like what we've been talking about, where you have to be willing to receive like criticism. You got to be able to look at the uncomfortable truth. You have to allow yourself to be moldable by somebody that you're in relationship with, right?
Yeah.
Get that help and let it come in. That, I mean, truthfully, and how many times do we talk about, like, if you want to go far, go together, right? You need help. Everybody needs help, right?
Everybody needs help.
Everybody needs help. And then there's this other really big part of it where you actually have to let that help in.
And it rarely looks like what you want it to look like.
It never looks like what you want it to
I'm not going to say never, right? I'm not going to say never, but more often than not, and it's rare if you're like, hey, that's what I wanted help to look like. And if that's what you wanted to help to look like, is it validating the pattern that you do not want to shift?
Think about this.
Maybe it's like, yeah, you don't have to change.
Like the teacher will appear when the student's ready, right?
Right.
Like your teacher ain't going to look the way that you think they do.
Right.
Right. Your guru isn't what you think they are. Right. The help that you're looking for is not the help that you need.
I want you to tell me I'm right and they're wrong. That's the help I'm looking for, that I'm doing everything right and then I'm okay and I'm going to be okay. And that they're the ones that need to change, not me. I don't have to change anything. That's the help I'm looking for.
Help me figure out exactly what I need to tell this person so that they change. Because apparently I just need to figure out a different way to communicate.
Right. And then that's joking, but it's serious. And then another aspect is like, tell me the things that I need to do to conform to the other person.
Mm-hmm. Help me fit into their box. And that's also the only help that you're looking for. Any help that says, actually that's a really narcissistic, shitty box you're trying to fit into.
This is like an unhealthy box. This is where you're like things here. Let's look at removing the illusion of a box. So like, no, this is the box that I need to fit into because I need this. This is where I'm at. And this is the box this is where I'm going to feel safe. So help me fit into that box. Like that was another one that I heard. She straight up, I'm not going to help you gaslight yourself. I'm like, excuse me. Why not? That's the help that I want. So, feed me that. And she said, nope. So.
Well, this was a very interesting topic.
Right.
I didn't think we were going to end up in this location.
I didn't either.
I'm pretty grateful for the conversation.
Thank you.
Is there any other kind of last minute thoughts before we go on to the Q&A, the question?
Breathe into your belly. Everyone right now, let's take a breath.
Yeah.
Feel your feet or the lowest part of your body that is connected to the earth.
Yes.
Bring your awareness into your body. Feel your body. And remember to exhale. Sometimes you need to remember to exhale. I'm like, I breathe.
We always love feedback too. Like we always love hearing what comes up for you when you listen to these episodes. And so if you do feel something, if you're like, wait a minute, what about this? Or you have a thought.
Or if you're scared right now, if this like scared you and you're feeling like confused and lost, like be really, really loving to yourself.
Yeah. You can reach out.
Yeah.
Please. You can send us messages on Facebook. You can email us, whatever it is, right? You can always reach out if you've got something that comes up from one of these podcasts, this one included.
Right. It's okay to have that reaction. It's okay to have a reaction.
For sure.
Yeah. It's normal to have a reaction.
And I guess it should always be said. I mean, we say it a lot and we've said it over the years, but like our intention with the podcast is to just spark little different ideas and plant seeds of curiosity. It's not to say that you're doing something wrong or right, or we're not coming from a place of criticism and judgment, even though, I mean, not to say all 360 episodes of this podcast haven't been that, right?
Like, I can think of one episode particular where I did nothing but cast judgment. Yeah,
there's definitely plenty of episodes when we were doing those things, but overall our really core intention with the podcast is to simply spark ideas and thoughts and plant little seeds that might help you heal and change and grow on your path. So
yeah, I feel
that's
like
all we're trying to do.
Exactly. We've grown along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. 6 years into this podcast, we're completely different people than when it started.
2 years ago, we're different. Like everything keeps changing.
End of the episode, we answer a question. You can call those questions in at any given time. The phone number is 423-521-0355, and you can leave us a voicemail and we play those on the podcast. Also, you can email us questions or send them to us on Messenger or something like that. That's totally fine. And jokingly, I guess I don't have to caveat it with a joke, but for some reason I did because it's clearly a joke. You can send it by like pigeon as well or crows. We have crows. That would be awesome.
Just have them look for the energy is love light.
Just love light.
Maybe we should make one of those.
Right? Like the bat symbol, but we throw up the symbol in the sky. Okay, here's this week's question. This one was emailed in. So I'm a people pleaser, and I just recently realized how much I do it. I do it with my partner, my kids, friends, even the person who I'm ordering coffee from. Help. I want to stop, but don't know how. People pleaser. It's a good question. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the best? First and foremost, I think having the awareness that you're doing it's awesome, right? Mm-hmm. Like somebody that is continually kind of placing everybody else's needs before theirs and having awareness that that's something that you're doing is a really big step. I always say, and I know we do too, right? Where it's like, how can you change something you're not aware of? So awareness is the first step. So the fact that you have that and that you've reached out, that's a really big step. Mm-hmm.
Having the desire to want to change it. Like this isn't working anymore and I've done it. I've done it a long time and now I'm ready to do something different. Having the desire to find other tools is big.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll go super deep to like the core of what this problem is and then talk a little bit about maybe some things that you can start implementing. So it's having awareness of maybe where it may have started for you. And then some things that you can do in the present moment. So people pleasing is a coping mechanism, right? Mm-hmm. It's trying to make sure that everybody around me is safe. So then I'm safe. It's trying to make sure that everybody else's needs are met so that nothing's wrong and there's no dysregulation and there's no turmoil and there's no stress and there's no fighting and there's no chaos. So I'm going to do everything to create that safe environment so that truthfully, it comes from wanting that safety for yourself, right? So that probably means that you grew up in really unsafe environments and you were modeled and displayed that type of people-pleasing behavior as a way to keep the peace and create safety in chaos. And when you placate your own emotions and your own needs and your own just autonomy for what you want in life and place it on other people, it's bypassing like this massive amount of disconnection with yourself and what's actually taking place. And it's actually placing a really big burden of your emotions and your feelings on the people that you're trying to help. Like there's an aspect of it where I'm dysregulated inside my body and I can't regulate it. So it's up to you to regulate it. And I'm going to place all of this on you to fix for me because I can't fix it myself and I can't feel it and I don't know how to. So I'm going to try to make sure, once again, that everybody's safe and everything's fine. And it just becomes this massive, overwhelming, toxic thing that can really affect relationships, with your kid. I mean, obviously, this person's reaching out, so they know all of that. But so that's where it comes from, right? It's a coping mechanism that you were learned and taught in order to stay safe. Yeah. Now, what do you do about it?
Can I spin off on that before we do what do we do about it?
Yeah, of course.
Can we do what we do about it at the end? I just want to add to that. First of all, like we recognize you're reaching out and like this isn't a shaming thing for every people pleaser out there and hearing that. Like this is like something that we want to change, right? This is something instead of so you're not doing anything wrong and you're ready to change these patterns that are no longer working for you and maybe no longer working for family around you. But right, it's about you. These aren't working for you anymore. People pleasers are born from children who never had their needs met. Their needs were always set aside, weren't important, and the responsibility of meeting others around them, a caretaker's needs, was placed on them. You had to take care of, make sure that your parental figures or your caregivers or maybe older siblings or maybe younger siblings, maybe you were parentified in that, you had to take care of your parents and your younger siblings. All of that was placed on you, and anytime you had a need, an emotion, something that you needed, whatever, it was criticized for, and you were being selfish, and you were supposed to give that to somebody else. So that's how people pleasers are often born. Now, I'm sure there's other ways, right? But that's just what we're speaking to at this moment. And this is what I find, in my opinion, to be the most common ways that they are born. So when we're looking at that and you see, I didn't get to have needs, and how that's still perpetuating. You're not taking care of your needs when you're people pleasers. You're taking care of everybody else's. And you got really, really good at that because it was your responsibility to take care, whether they told you it was your responsibility or the situation created it to feel like it was your responsibility in order for you to be safe, to receive any sort of love or food or connection or nourishment. So even if your parents are saying like, I never did that, I never put that responsibility on you, if it was implied in that way, that was your responsibility. And that's how you took it as a little kid for whatever your dynamic was. Maybe, maybe you were with aunts or grandparents or foster parents or, all of the ways that it came, your needs were not met, but you were expected to meet the needs of others. So now as an adult, and you're out there people pleasing, it makes sense that you are still not only tuned into other people's needs and pushing yours away, but you're finding ways to meet your needs by projecting them onto other people. So when you have a need to have somebody care for you, but you can't have that need, you project that and you give that. So you are giving to those around you the needs that you need met, but you don't know how to ask for, which is how resentments happen, because maybe those are the needs, but maybe they're not. And when they either don't receive the help that you're giving them or return it, even though you can't accept it, right? Because they'll try and return it maybe, and you're still pushing that aside. But hidden biasms start to play, resentments start to play, because your needs are still not being met. You're doing everything you can to meet your needs by projecting them, but they're still not being met. So just having awareness for that for the moment and being like, the needs that I need met are the needs that I'm trying to meet in everyone else. And that gives you a good place to start looking.
Yes. Yeah, if I'm trying to create this environment for my kid or for my partner, then I need to create that environment for myself. So like the easiest thing, and when we say easy, we recognize that this isn't easy.
It's so hard.
This type of work is really, really hard, right? It's really funny because healing is simple, but it's a really hard thing to do. So because this, like Steph said, it comes from this place of your needs not being met and not being honored, not being respected, not being seen, you can start off with really simple things where you prioritize some needs. And there's some really basic ones that you can start prioritizing, like just self-care, right? Brushing your teeth, making sure that you get a shower today, making sure that you're getting enough sleep. These little tiny things that you can start doing, making sure that I'm drinking enough water, meeting some of the core basic needs of a human and prioritizing those really basic ones will help then build confidence in your abilities to then start prioritizing some of these other, not just needs, but now wants, some of your desires, some of the things that are more important, your time, your value, your worth. So you start with all of these little things, and it just becomes daily practices, right? And like I prefer the verbiage of practicing all of these things, because with practice, practice comes with the added benefit of knowing that you're going to make mistakes, right? Like the definition of practice built into it is you're going to mess up, right? That's why it's called practice. So you're going to practice these little daily routines for yourself, whatever resonates with you, whatever helps, whatever feels good. Start implementing really, really small ones and just practice them every single day. And we're going to take a really long time to get good at these and get consistent with these. And with each one, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you start prioritizing more and more and more of what you want, what you need, your safety, your security. And then that is how you eventually get to the point where you're not only like you've healed people pleasing, but now you're shifting and changing your environment and making really hard decisions to create a really safe place for you to exist, because you're actually worth it.
Yes. And I'm going to add one more to that too, is letting go of the need to have things done a certain way. A lot of time, yeah. When my brain was like, we're not gonna let go of that, so I'm gonna draw a blank. A lot of times we overextend ourselves with people pleasing because we don't let anyone else help. And there is the thing that, we have the story of it would take more work for me to explain how to do it than it would for me to just do it myself.
Yeah.
So a couple things that I would look at that. First of all, maybe at the beginning, right? But as things go. And secondly, it doesn't need to be done your way.
That's the shadow side of
right?
people pleasing, is you're actually just
controlling
everything.
Yes. So allow things to not be done. Allow people to be maybe upset with you for not doing them when they're used to it.
Maybe they're just upset.
Or maybe they're just upset.
Or sad.
Right? Allow people the opportunity to do it themselves. Allow your kids to tie their own shoes. Allow them to figure out how to do it for themselves so they know how to do it. Allow your partner, just throughout the board, allow people to figure it out for themselves and for things to just not get done.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world if things don't get done. Maybe, replacing brakes on a vehicle, taking it to the shop, do things like that. But you just so many balls that you can drop and the world's not going to stop spinning. You're still going to be loved. You're still worthy. You can still go order that coffee.
You can still be safe.
You can still be safe.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Yes.
Again, you can send those to us anytime. You can call us. The number's 423-521-0355. And it's in the show notes.
Yeah.
So I say it fast or we go over it a couple of times, but it's always in the show notes. It's also at the website. So if you go to the website, you can find the number there to call in and leave us a question.
I tried doing a jingle, but it just confused everybody more. So
call the number on the No. Thank you, everybody. This has been a great episode. And let us know again if this sparked anything for you. We love hearing your thoughts.